Hey y'all, I'm Brea, and one thing about me, I love a little healthy competition. And so instead of just telling you guys what my 5-star predictions are for the rest of the year, I'm gonna make them battle. And I feel like every time I do this, I think of that meme where it's like, now Kith. So these books are gonna be battling today. We're gonna do it tournament style. So I have 16 books that I really think I'm gonna give 5 stars, but I'm sure there's gonna be a 5-star that's probably closer to a 6-star and that just beats everybody else out. You know, like sometimes you just have those books that rise to the top. And I wanna see if I can predict my own reading. And so I've tried to set the initial bracket up so that all of the books are against something that's similar in genre, or they have something similar in common, so that it can be a real battle, okay, to see who's going to win. I already know I have some hard decisions to make, but let's go ahead and take a look at the bracket to see who's gonna win this book battle. Here is the 5-star book battle bracket. I have it in my Canva because that's the easiest way for me to do it. So we're just gonna get into it. The first battle is against Sweet Heat by Balu Babalola and Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Both of these are romances. And so I'll give you a little synopsis of each of the books before I decide which one's gonna move on. So Sweet Heat, this is a sequel to my favorite romance literally of all time. So in the story, Kiki and Malachi have broken up. I believe they've been broken up for a few years, but they've been brought back into each other's orbit as they're both in a wedding together. So I'm so excited to get back into like Kiki and Malachi's like relationship. Listen, I'm usually not that nosy when it comes to other people's relationships, but Kiki and Malachi, their chemistry is off the chart. So I'm interested to see why they broke up in the first place and like how their chemistry is portrayed in the second book. And then we have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And this is about a couple who splits up. They decide that their marriage isn't working, but they decide to continue co-parenting. But as they're doing this, their connection and energy kind of brings them back together. I've heard nothing but good things about Before I Let Go. So while I'm so interested in this, and while obviously like every book on here, I think it's gonna be a 5-star read for me, it has to be Sweet Heat moving on. I don't know what's gonna beat Sweet Heat out, but listen, I need to be back in that relationship bad, okay? And then we have the Raven Scholar against Strength of the Few. So in the Raven Scholar, there is an empire that ends its reign, and then there are 7 contestants competing to take over that spot, but one of them is murdered, and so our main character is tasked with finding out who the murderer is while also still competing in these trials. And I love a good trial book, okay? I love when people are competing for something. Again, here we are with the book battle, okay? I love some good competition. So this is definitely up my alley. They are vying for an entire empire, but then there's also, it sounds like, this murder mystery that's involved. And I feel like I have heard nothing but good things about the Raven Scholar. However, it is going up against The Strength of the Few by James Islington. And this is the sequel to The Will of the Many. And The Will of the Many was one of my favorite books, I believe, of 2023. I love that book so bad, but also I don't remember too much about what happened in there because it's been such a long time since I've read it, but also I just can't remember the ending that well. So I will definitely need to reread The Will of the Many before I get into The Strength of the Few. But just as a recap, The Will of the Many, it talks about this world where essentially it's kind of like a pyramid of some sort where people's will are siphoned into one person. Okay, so like if I'm in the lower level or lower class, my will is then siphoned into someone above me, and then that person's will is then siphoned into someone above them until there's kind of someone at the top. And so our main character, he is tasked to go into this academy where all of the elites are kind of trained to essentially just be at the top of this pyramid, right? But we're learning about him as he's trying to go into this schooling, but also he's not necessarily who he says he is, but he's hired to go in and find all these secrets out about what's going on in this school. He's tasked to solve a murder. He's tasked to find out about like an ancient weapon of some sort. It's such a good book. Again, I have to reread the first one, but in The Strength of the Few, we're following our main character as he's coming off of this trial that the Academy had held in the first book. But while he did that, he is now being replicated into 3 other worlds. And so he's still trying to uncover like what's going on, and essentially just trying to make sure that he survives. And I feel like this is such a tough one because The Will of the Many was one of my favorites. However, I think I'm going to enjoy The Raven Scholar just a little bit more. And I say that because I'm not sure how many books James Islington plans on coming out with for this entire series for The Will of the Many. But I know typically there's like second book syndrome where it just usually isn't as good as the first book or whatever the ending of the series usually is. Like there's usually like middle book syndrome, and I haven't read enough from James Islington to be confident that that's not going to happen here. So I'm going to move Raven Scholar ahead. And listen, if you want to fight me in the comments, I'm ready to tussle. But then let's move on. We have Atmosphere against the Ministry of Time. I feel like Atmosphere, I probably don't even have to pitch that much because Taylor Jenkins Reid, I feel like she be up and down booktube and the book community all the time. So my history with Taylor Jenkins Reid, I didn't love Daisy Jones and the Six, okay? It was kind of just very middle of the road for me, but I absolutely loved Carrie Soto Is Back. I feel like in that book, that felt like a very real and tangible character to me. Taylor Jenkins Reid essentially had me Googling, how is Carrie Soto doing now? Like I thought she was a real person. That's how well to me that book was written. So in Atmosphere, it is set in the 1980s and it is following this woman who gets accepted into a NASA space program. All I know is that there's like a sapphic romance that's kind of involved, but in my head I'm like, sapphic romance, space, 1980s. That sounds so good to me. And I feel like I've kind of heard mixed reviews about this one, but I think it's going to be something that works for me. And then we have The Ministry of Time, and it is described as a time travel romance, spy thriller, and a workplace comedy. If that's not 5 stars, I don't know what is. And so in Ministry of Time, we follow like a government, I guess, that is trying to solidify that time travel exists. So they hire these like expats, which are people that they pull from different points in history, but then they hire people to live with these expats. But essentially there ends up being a romance between the person they hire and then one of the expats, okay? So we got romance, we got time travel. Again, this sounds up my alley, but I definitely think this is going to be one of the tougher decisions for me. This is tough. I'm tempted to say Taylor Jenkins Reid just because I've read from her before. I don't know. I think because The Ministry of Time is pitched as time travel plus a spy thriller, I think I may enjoy this more. We'll see. This one I think is going to be tough. When I actually read both of these, I think it's going to be very close. Again, I think they're both going to be 5 stars. Which one's just going to reign supreme? We'll find out. And then the last battle, now kiss, on this side of the bracket is The Martian Chronicles against Slaughterhouse-Five. Okay, I put these two against each other because I feel like they're very classic sci-fi fiction-esque books. And I feel like they were both written a while ago, so I feel like it was only fair to put these two against each other. And so The Martian Chronicles is a collection of connected stories about humanity and how they are colonizing Mars. And I feel like this is going to be a 5-star read for me because I've read one other Ray Bradbury book, maybe two, but the one that sticks out in my mind is R for Rocket, and that was also a compilation of short stories. And I feel like R for Rocket is one of those books that really sparked my love for like real sci-fi, or like older sci-fi, I should say. And so I just feel like I still kind of remember the feeling I got when I read R is for Rocket, and that was literally almost like a decade ago. And so I know The Martian Chronicles is something that people consider like a quintessential sci-fi, kind of like classic in the sci-fi genre. And so I think it's something that I'm going to end up really enjoying. Again, aliens, humanity, I feel like there's going to be a lot of like social commentary in there, which I just really typically love. And then we have Slaughterhouse 5. This is about a man who becomes unstuck in time, which essentially just means he can time travel. And we meet him as he is experiencing different moments in his life. And one of those moments is when he was captured as a prisoner in World War II. Again, this is one of those books that I feel like everybody talks about, that it's kind of like speculative sci-fi, I believe, or just more like literary sci-fi. But also, I did a video a couple months ago about finding your like book taste and making sure that you're fixing your TBR, right? Because we all could do a little bit of that. But one of the things I recommended was taking a quiz, and the quiz would tell you what type of reader you were, and it would kind of break you out by color. And the color I got said that I would enjoy Slaughterhouse 5 because I kind of like unpredictable endings. I like things that are kind of like genre bending. And so I feel like this is going to be a 5-star, or at least I'm hoping. Okay, but I honestly think that The Martian Chronicles has to win out on this one because I've read from Ray Bradbury before, and I don't know, aliens just sound a lot more interesting to me than a world war. All right, and so before we have all of this side battle out, let's go ahead and move to our other side. And so first up, we have Blood Slaves versus Immaculate Conception. I feel like I put these two against each other because Blood Slaves is a book that combines like horror, thriller, paranormal with historical fiction. And then Immaculate Conception is also kind of like a genre bending book, I feel like, where it has sci-fi, also with just kind of this thought-provoking element. And so Blood Slaves, oh, I'm just already so excited about reading this book. I feel like I already know my answer, but let's get into the synopses, okay? So Blood Slaves is a vampire origin story where essentially the only way slaves could be free and get revenge is to become a vampire. And I feel like this synopsis reminds me of The Deep by Rivers Solomon, where slaves who are thrown overboard during the slave trade end up becoming mermaids, essentially. And that book is literally one of my favorite books of all time. So the fact that essentially this is about slaves who become vampires, I typically don't even like vampires that much, but I feel like I'm gonna like it in Blood Slaves, okay? And spoiler alert, Blood Slaves is my next read. I did just recently buy this. I haven't picked it up because I wanted to be unbiased in this video, but best believe that tomorrow, Blood Slaves is getting started, okay? And then we have Immaculate Conception. And this book is essentially where technology allows for someone else to enter into someone else's mind. So just imagine if you could just like port yourself into your best friend's head or your mom's head. Like, you know, you guys could kind of share a mind, share abilities and talents, you know? And to me, that's really interesting. It's definitely deep sci-fi, but also I feel like it's gonna have some social commentary in there. And I feel like I've heard nothing but 5-star reviews about Immaculate Conception. Again, I think this is one that I'm really going to enjoy. Unfortunately for it is up against Blood Slaves. And I just don't know if anything at this level of the bracket would have beat Blood Slaves out. And then next up, we have some Stephen Graham Jones, which is one of my favorite authors of all time. And he recently came out with a book that is technically 2 books in one. The first one is Killer on the Road, and the second is The Babysitter Lives. I couldn't fit all of that into this little rectangle, so I just put the acronyms here. And then we have You Killed Me First by John Mars. So Stephen Graham Jones, Killer on the Road. That story is essentially about a serial killer who targets hitchhikers. And then we have The Babysitter Lives. This is essentially like a haunted house type of story where a babysitter, she is watching over two twins, and then one of the twins ends up sleepwalking, and she realizes that they're not alone in that house. So I feel like I actually enjoy haunted house stories, even though I don't mess with spirits, okay? I'm gonna make that very clear. I don't like spirits, good or bad. I'm minding my business. I would like them to mind theirs, okay? And then we have You Killed Me First by John Mars. John Mars has written one of my favorite books of all time, which was The One. However, that is on his sci-fi side of the house. I feel like John Mars writes sci-fi and then he writes like these thrillers, and You Killed Me First is on the thriller side, and I haven't ever read any of his thriller books, so I'm not sure what to expect here. But You Killed Me First follows three friends, and it sounds like they kind of have like a fake relationship going on. Based on the synopsis, it's giving very much those three ladies from White Lotus who are like kind of fake friends, you know? But based on this fake relationship, it sounds like one of them is gonna meet their demise. And I'm interested to see it. And I feel like this is another one that's tough because not all Stephen Graham Jones books have been 5 stars for me. Most of them have been 4 and above. So I feel like there may be a hit or miss, especially because we're thinking about there's 2 stories here that are being considered into this. But I've also never read a John Mars thriller, only the sci-fi. But now that I think about it, I have actually read one other John Mars book that actually fell into sci-fi, which was The Minders. And I can't even tell you what it was about. That was how like middle of the road it was for me. So that's making me a little skeptical about John Mars. So I'm gonna move ahead Stephen Graham Jones on this one. I hope that John Mars surprises me though. I truly do. And then next up we have Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Kavanaugh against Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. And so I paired these up because these are essentially like the same synopsis. It follows the same type of trope where 2 strangers meet and they decide, hey, we're gonna kill for each other, okay? I'm so interested to see how that works. I've never read a trope like this before, but it's so intriguing to me because like me, I tell my friends all the time, I am not a ride or die. I'm a ride and maybe like anything other than a felony. I'm not killing for them and they know that. I'll still support them. I'll try to get them out on bail and bond, you know, but not doing the actual killing. And so I'm interested to see how the story progresses where 2 strangers meet and it's like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna go kill this person for you. To me, that just sounds nuts, but I'm so interested in it. And so Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Kavanaugh. This is about 2 strangers who meet in a grief counseling group and they decide to make a pact to murder each other's abusers, which, you know what? I support women's rights and women's wrongs on that one. So I'm really interested to see how that turns out. Also, I've read The 13 by Steve Kavanaugh, which was like a courtroom thriller, and I tend to love courtroom thrillers. And Steve Kavanaugh's writing to me was really captivating. I feel like the pacing of it was really good, so I'm interested to see how that transfers over into something that's not like a courtroom mystery. And then we have Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson, but I've read one other book by Peter Swanson, which was 8 Perfect Murders. That was also kind of middle of the road for me. I think I gave it like a 3.5. I remember feeling a little bored towards like the middle of the book, but I feel like everybody who reads Peter Swanson, I feel like The Kind Worth Killing is the one that people always talk about, that they enjoyed. And this one is about 2 strangers who meet in the airport and they make a pact to kill somebody for each other. That one is where they're losing me a little bit because an airport. I mean, it's smart, but like, how do you trust them? Listen, honestly, I'm so intrigued for both, and this is hard. This one's hard for me. Because this is like probably the most even matched out of all of them. The only thing I have to go on is that I've read from both of these authors before and I enjoyed the Steve Kavanaugh book more. So I'm just gonna move that forward, even though I think The Kind Worth Killing is one of the books that is known for this trope the best. And then last up on this side, we have Dungeon Crawler Carl versus Severance. So Dungeon Crawler Carl is about a story where Earth is destroyed and all of the survivors have to compete on a televised show where they are competing for their survival. And so apparently in this book, Carl and his cat are in this show trying to survive and competing. And I've just heard that this book like kind of blends sci-fi, but it's also like kind of funny. And I've heard so many good things about the entire series, not just the first book. And the synopsis of this and like the tone in which people describe this kind of reminds me of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I really did enjoy. So I'm so interested in getting to this one. Again, I love a good competition. I love a good survival story. Like this book is really hitting on some tropes that I really enjoy. And then we have Severance. We follow an office worker in New York as she continues to work her little desk job in publishing, even though there's like this widespread plague that's happening and like everybody's dying off. She is just kind of still like living her life like nothing happened. Again, I think all of these are going to be 5-star, but I have this feeling in my chest that Dungeon Crawler Carl is going to be one of my new favorite series of all time. It just sounds like it's up my alley. Okay. Whew. Okay, so we made it through the first round of picks. Honestly, just looking at this spreadsheet is making me so excited to read. I can't even lie. Like all of these look like bangers. So let's go back up to the top and figure out where the next battle is happening, okay? So we have Sweet Heat against the Raven Scholar. And I feel like this is tough because these are two completely different genres, right? We have a romance versus kind of like a fantasy book. And again, we have Balu Balbalola and my favorite romance of all time against an author that I've never read before. However, I think the premise of the Raven Scholar sounds so good. Oh, this is so tough, you guys. I'm gonna make a decision, but let me know down below in the comments, like between these two, what would you choose? I keep thinking I want to put the Raven Scholar because my original genre loves are sci-fi and fantasy, right? But then Sweet Heat is such, I just feel like it's gonna be so good. Like I'm gonna love being in that relationship again. Okay, I'm gonna go Sweet Heat. Which is crazy because like romance really isn't typically my jam, but I'm just going based off of pure excitement. And I think Sweet Heat is gonna do it. All right, so we have the Ministry of Time versus the Martian Chronicles. Both are sci-fi. Both are like sci-fi elements that I really love. Like on one hand with the Ministry of Time, we have time travel. We have a space spy thriller. The Martian Chronicles, we have like aliens, and then we have like, you know, all of these stories that are weaving together. We're talking about humanity. This is tough because I kind of want to move the Ministry of Time forward just because I feel like I'm going to enjoy that more in the moment. However, the Martian Chronicles, because it is like a series of short stories that kind of go together, I'm bound to like not love every single story in there. However, I feel like the overall impact that the Martian Chronicles has on me may be greater, right? Like as I sit down with it, I think it's gonna be something I enjoy more. So yeah, I'm just gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna go the Martian Chronicles. And now that I see that Sweet Heat and the Martian Chronicles are against each other, I feel like I've made an error somewhere. We'll handle that in a minute. All right, so let's go back to this side. We now have Blood Slaves against Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones. So we have one hand Blood Slaves, one of the best synopses that I've ever heard in my entire life, against one of my favorite authors to ever exist. How am I supposed to decide? I feel like I'm the Bachelorette right now and I have one rose left and I'm like, who's gonna get it? This is tough. I feel like in most instances, I feel like me reading from an author previously would be an advantage. However, in this case, again, because it's 2 books in one, I feel like there's a greater chance of me maybe not loving one. But then at the same time, I've never read anything by Marcus Redmond, like anything. So like I could open up the first 2 pages and absolutely hate the story. But I feel like Blood Slaves really has the capacity to be like a really new favorite for me. So I'm gonna move it forward. I feel like I will know in a couple days if that was a mistake or not. But we don't have time to harp on it. So let's move down. Then we have Kill for Me, Kill for You against Dungeon Crawler Carl. For me, this is probably the easiest decision in the entire bracket. I'm moving Dungeon Crawler Carl up. Again, I think this is gonna be one of my favorite series that I've read in a very long time. All right, let's go back. Here we are. Sweet Heat, which is a romance, against The Martian Chronicles, which is a sci-fi book about aliens. And I feel like, if nothing, this tells you how diverse of a reader I am. But again, looking at this, I feel like I've made a mistake. Now that I'm looking at this, I feel like I should have chosen The Raven Scholar. But because Sweet Heat is a sequel, that is the only thing that's going against it, right? And so that makes me a little nervous that I've maybe put too much stock into Sweet Heat. So I'm gonna move The Martian Chronicles forward. All right, and then we have Blood Slaves against Dungeon Crawler Carl, and here is where things get difficult because I haven't read from either of these authors. I could open up either one of these books and hate my life. Oh, it's like both of these just sound like my perfect book. Oh my God. Whose idea was it for me to put 5-star contenders up against each other? I know it was mine, but I'm having regrets. And I feel like this is tough because I've realized about myself this year that like something that really hits for me that is almost always going to be a win is going to be historical fiction wrapped up into some other genre like horror or thriller or paranormal. And that's exactly what Blood Slaves is saying that it's going to do. And then on the other hand, we have Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I feel like is such a unique premise. I love a good competition show, and especially because this is being televised, it's reminding me of like the Hunger Games. It's reminding me of some of my favorite reality TV shows. Sounds like the perfect storm to me. And so the fact that these two are up against each other, like I feel like these two should be up against each other in the final. Because I'm gonna tell you guys right now, I think whoever wins out in these two is going to be the overall winner. Part of me wants to say Dungeon Crawler Carl, only because I'm nervous that I'm about to read Blood Slaves and it's not going to hit the way that I think, and this entire bracket is going to be thrown off in the next 2 days. I feel like Blood Slaves has more capacity to go a little wrong. I'm going to move Dungeon Crawler Carl to the front. So I feel like this feels correct for my reading taste. We have 2 sci-fi against each other. We have a traditional sci-fi, The Martian Chronicles, something that's quintessential sci-fi classic. And then we have a new sci-fi that I feel like is taking the book community by storm, that I think in turn will become a sci-fi classic. But like I said, I think whoever won out of Blood Slaves and Dungeon Crawler Carl was gonna win. So I think, oh, this is crazy to say, I think Dungeon Crawler Carl is going to be like the 6-star read out of all of these. See, like I said, I tried to plan on reading a lot of these in the next few months. So I will definitely follow up once I've read all of these to see if my guesses were right or wrong. Make sure you subscribe so that you can follow along to see all of my thoughts on all of these books in the next couple months. And let me know down below in the comments, would you have made any different decisions here? But I'm so excited to get into all of these. Like, stuff like this is just like, oh my gosh, I love reading so much. And if you made it to the end of this video, leave a star emoji for the 5-star book battle. And as always, if you made it to the end, you are my absolute favorites, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.